The crumbling gray facade of 999 Nightshade Road stared down at me as I pulled up outside. The old office building had a dark, cold feeling to it, causing me to shiver as I cut the engine and the rattle of my old Ford ceased abruptly. There were stories told about this building, and not the feel-good, happy kind. Rumor had it that this century-old tower was cursed. Unexplainably high suicide rates of those people working inside the building were the first clue, but there were others. The elevators broke down with people in them constantly. There were accidents and injuries far beyond the norm. At least once a year, someone jumps from the roof. I looked in the back seat and grabbed the insulated pizza bag and a crumpled paper sack filled with dipping sauce and soda. The smell of pizza wafted into my nostrils for the 1000th time that night, and for once it didn't make me hungry. Instead, I just felt tired and sick to my stomach. It had been a long day. Heading to the front entrance, part of me wondered who could be here so late at night. It was past 11, and I would have thought most workers had gone home for the day. But when I buzzed the number I'd been given to be let in, a man answered in a tired-sounding voice. "Hello?" His words were difficult to understand through the static. "Hey, Puccina's Pizza, I got your pie." "Come on up. I'm on floor 14. Just go left after you get off the elevator. It's the only room with the lights still on." The man sounded exhausted, and I felt sympathy for him. At least I would get to go home after this delivery. He sounded like he was still going to be here for a while, working late. Nobody orders a pizza at the office if they're planning on going home for supper. He buzzed me in, and I walked through a set of glass doors and then another, entering into an enormous foyer. The place looked old on the outside, but within it was sleek and modern. They had probably renovated it in the last 10 years by the looks of things. The lobby was all polished steel and glass, aside from one ominous gray stone wall. There was a fireplace straight ahead, like a guidepost leading visitors towards the elevators. As I approached the fireplace, I saw it was large, almost as tall as me, with a flue of shining steel that stretched up indefinitely, disappearing into the high ceiling above. The place made me feel tiny. It was like being in the house of a giant at the top of a beanstalk. I was completely alone, my footsteps echoing in the dim, empty space. There was something creepy about being here by myself in the night, when this place was normally occupied with hundreds of people. People busily marching about with cell phones in hand, high-heeled shoes and leather soles clicking across the polished marble floors, voices buzzing as they mingled together in a cacophony of business talk. Now all of that was gone. I'd been inside this building before, and normally a receptionist would be there to greet me at the front desk. But I guessed that she had gone home at this late hour. There wasn't even a janitor or a cleaning lady mopping floors or shining windows. It was just me. When I arrived at the elevator, I hit the button to go up. It glowed a faint orange, and after a few seconds, an elevator door behind me opened with a ding. I got inside and tried to remember what floor the man had said. After such a long day, the numbers of apartments and addresses were blending together. I couldn't remember if it was floor 12 or 14. My mind was fuzzy and tired, and no matter how hard I struggled, I couldn't think of it. The delivery slip was no help either, as it only had the street address and a buzzer number. Instead of settling on one floor, I hit both buttons at the same time, thinking I would just peek my head out and see if there was anyone on the 12th floor before going up to 14. I was pretty sure it was the latter of the two, but this seemed like the quickest way to check. The last thing I wanted was to be wandering the dark, empty floor of some abandoned office space in the middle of the night. This place was creepy enough as it was without that shit. As the elevator ascended, I heard my stomach gurgle noisily. I had skipped dinner and now it was catching up with me. I felt lightheaded and nauseated, my ears buzzing slightly, and a migraine was forming with a dull pressure behind my eyes, making them feel like overinflated balloons about to pop. Finally, the elevator dinged and I stepped off, rubbing my eyes. When I opened them, I looked around and saw I was in a hallway with faded yellow wallpaper. The patterns on it looked retro and out of date. It reminded me of a set for a low-budget version of Mad Men, or some movie which had taken place in the 50s or 60s, only far more depressing. The fluorescent lights overhead were flickering ever so slightly, as if they needed to be replaced, and I began to move instinctively away from them down the hall, trying to avoid making my headache worse. Go left after you get off the elevator, I said to myself, thinking this had to be the right floor. The lights were all on, and despite the poor quality of them, most other sections of the building were blacked out as seen from outside. As I walked down the hallway looking for an office door, I saw none. It was like this corridor was all perfectly smooth yellow walls, leading towards a turn. Overhead, the lights continued flickering constantly, making me feel even more sick. There was something wrong with the electrical system on this floor of the building, I guessed. The hallway broke to the right at the end, so I followed it and turned, looking off down another long stretch of unbroken corridor. At the end of this hallway there was a left turn, and I figured that was where the office would be. I couldn't help but think that this was an odd layout for an office, though. Very odd. Suddenly I noticed the smell, getting stronger as I walked. It was a powerful odor of mildew, as if I were in an old, rotted basement. This section of the building must have had a recent flood from a burst pipe or something like that, I thought to myself. The floor was squishy and wet beneath my feet, and I could feel it starting to soak through the seams of my cheap running shoes and moistening my socks. I kept walking, thinking I would have to ask the customer about this weird turn of events once I finally reached him. But once I got to the end of the corridor, it just led on to another identical hallway, another long, yellow-walled passageway leading about 50 yards towards a turn. Whatever this floor was, it was not the right one. It was almost like a maze of some sort, and I wondered if it was once an escape room that someone had created at great cost which had fallen into disrepair. That would explain the layout of the place, not to mention the smell and the water damage. Maybe they had closed for the pandemic and never reopened again. I knew a few places like that. Deciding that was likely the case, I turned around and began to head back towards the elevator. Obviously, the man had been on the 14th floor after all, and the more I thought about it, the more sure I became. The man had said floor 14, turn left from the elevators and look for the first door with a light on. So I went back the way I had come, only to find that it wasn't the same as I'd left it. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. The walls were the same urine yellow color, with the same hideous, outdated patterns on them, but the corridor turned right instead of left at the end. It didn't make sense. I had exited the elevator and gone left down the hallway, turning right at the end. I remembered specifically that it was a right turn, and I was 100% sure of that fact. But now it was the opposite. Where the hallway should have turned 90 degrees to the left, leading back towards the elevators, it was now another right turn, leading away from them. It was like I had entered some strange mirror world where nothing was how I'd left it seconds before. Feeling the wallpaper with my hands, I searched for a seam or a hidden panel, thinking this had to be a trick. I was suddenly picturing a YouTube gag. Maybe I had unwittingly been set up, and I was on that prank show on Netflix, hosted by Dusty from Stranger Things. My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them felt right. Everything felt awful and wrong, with those damn fluorescent lights constantly flickering overhead, and that horrible, musty, wet smell always in my nostrils. It made me want to puke. Think, I told myself. There has to be a way out of here. If this was an escape room, was it automated to make the walls move and change to disorient people? No, that seemed too far-fetched, and besides, I couldn't find any marks on the floor or any spaces in the walls to allow something like that. No one could make a place that constantly changed like this. It was like something from a horror movie or a science fiction show. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't explainable. And it wasn't being done by a person. I was suddenly very sure of that. My knees were wobbly as I realized that I was trapped in a place that I couldn't comprehend. It wasn't a regular floor of an office building. It was just disguised to look like that. This place was a trap to lure humans inside, the same way hunters would ensnare an animal. It was like a glitch between our realities and the one next to it. A scar in the onion skin of the multiverse, allowing me to slip between layers. My heart began to race as sweat rolled down my cheeks, my hands trembling as I picked at my nails, a nervous habit I picked up from my late father. A lump rose in my throat as nausea overcame me, and I hurled all over the soggy carpeting, dropping the pizza box to the floor where it sank into the shag with a wet, squelching sound. That mildew smell was getting worse, I realized, as if I were going deeper and deeper into a sickening basement filled with mold. Disbelief ran through my mind for a few seconds. I was tired. I had simply been on autopilot and I had taken another turn without realizing it. I would walk around that corner and another one after that and find the elevator sitting there waiting for me. I'd made an extra turn, that was all. It was so simple. Sure, I'd thought there were only 2 turns, but it had been a long day. My mind was playing tricks on me, that was all. I breathed an unsteady sigh of relief. With that thought firmly planted in my mind, I began to march purposefully down the hallway. Then I realized I had forgotten the pizza and raced back to get it. But it was gone. The thermal insulated bag, which would cost $50 to replace if I lost it, as well as the customer's order. It was all missing. Vanished as if someone had walked through the wallpaper and taken it, then disappeared again behind the yellow to hide. But the walls were still smooth and blank. Not a door or light switch to be seen. There were no Wi-Fi routers attached to the ceiling, no thermostats on the walls, or motivational posters like in a regular office. Only flickering fluorescent lights and soggy shag carpeting, piss-colored wallpaper, and hopeless despair. I took out my cell phone thinking I would call for help. Someone would find a way to rescue me from this place, whatever it was. I just needed to dial 911 and wait for the authorities to arrive. But my phone had no signal. Despite my close proximity to 100 different cell towers, this place was blocking any chance of reaching the outside world. Attempting to dial 911, I found it wouldn't go through. Nothing would go through. Texts, calls, emails, everything was blocked due to a lack of signal. The thinking icon on my phone just spun around in hopeless circles, never finding an answer. Desperate to get out of this place, I began to run back the way I'd come in, not caring when the hallways didn't go where I expected them to. I just sprinted, terrified, turning down one random corridor after the next, thinking maybe if I ran fast and hard enough, I could outrun this place, and I would find myself back in front of the elevators again. My feet squelched and sunk deeper into the shag carpeting, further with each step I took, as if the furry material beneath my feet was getting longer like grass left unmowed. No matter how long I ran for, the elevators remained stubbornly hidden, as if they had blended back into the walls as soon as I exited them, like alien cloaking equipment in a science fiction movie. And either way, the place was changing. Every time I left one space and came back to check, it was different than it was before. Finally, the zigzagging corridors ended. I found myself in an empty yellow room. The shag carpeting was now up to the tops of my shoes, and I felt like I was sinking into it more with each step. It was like quicksand, sucking at my heels and making me exhausted as I fought against it, like tiny hands were grasping and pulling at my feet. A filing cabinet sat in one corner of this new room, abandoned. A pencil sat atop it. These were the only signs of anything different I had seen since getting off the elevator. Stumbling toward it like a desert walker finding an oasis, I grabbed onto the filing cabinet and felt its cool steel, trying to judge for myself whether it was an illusion or not. It felt real. I picked up the pencil and found its lead had been removed, and it was just a hollow tube of wood now. Useless. I had hoped I could use it to write a message, to tell someone I'd been here, but that wouldn't work. How long had I been wandering this place for? Suddenly I couldn't remember. It felt like a very, very long time. But strangely, I wasn't hungry anymore. I tried to open the filing cabinet, but found the drawers were locked. Attempting to pick the whole thing up, I discovered it was attached securely to the floor as if bolted in place. Part of me wanted to pick it up and throw it, smashing it through one of those disgusting urine yellow walls, hoping to break through to the other side. But what would I find if I did? If there were more sickly yellow walls and endless twisting corridors, I would lose my mind completely. I tried to pound on the walls of the room with my fists, but found they were sturdy and unyielding just like the others. The only way out was to move forward or to move backward. Suddenly, either one seemed the same option. The fluorescent lights were particularly bad in this room, flickering with a mind-numbing buzz that would drive most men insane within a matter of minutes. I had been in here for a while. Again, the concept of time seemed meaningless, as my phone had stopped working, and the little clock at the top of the screen was stuck at 11:17 p.m., around the time when I'd gotten into the elevator. But I'd been in here for hours, it felt like, maybe longer. If someone had told me it was days, I wouldn't have argued. Then again, if someone else had insisted it was just a few minutes, I would have believed them too. Finally, I got so sick of the flickering hum of the overhead lights, I moved on to the next room. This one was empty. When I looked back, so was the previous one I had exited, despite the fact that I just hugged the cold steel filing cabinet like a newborn moments prior. I wished I had brought that pencil with me, as some trophy or souvenir of reality, decaying and broken as it was. I vowed that if I came across anything else, I would take it, just so that I could hold it in my hand and tell myself I wasn't crazy, that something else existed besides me and the damp shag carpeting, yellow wallpaper, and flickering fluorescent lights. But room after room stood empty and unadorned, as I marched through their doorways from one to the next. And then I was back out in the hallways again, roaming through dim corridors with broken fluorescent lights strobing overhead. The same exact, unstopping pale yellow wallpaper remaining stubbornly plastered on the walls. Something was different in this section, though. It was a feeling rather than something observable. A feeling like eyes on the back of my neck watching me. I got the impression I was traveling deeper and deeper into the lair of some horrible monster, getting closer to its mildew-stinking breath. My feet were soaked now, and I took off my shoes, tired of the wet, squelching sounds they were making constantly. It didn't feel any better walking barefoot, but that sound was gone at least, and that helped. The migraine, which had been forming as a dull pressure within my eyeballs, had now spread outward and infected my forehead, my temples, and the top of my dome. I could feel a vein throbbing above my eye, a signal of the stress I was under. I kept hearing footsteps behind me, and it was making me nervous. But whenever I looked back, there was nobody there. As I rounded the next corner, a thought occurred to me. I pretended to keep walking, moving my feet in ever smaller circles so that it sounded like I was moving away from the corner. Then I peeked my head around the wall and checked to see if someone was following me. To my horror, there was. I ducked back behind the wall, my heart skipping several beats and fluttering in my chest. Terrified, I looked again, but the thing was gone, as if I had just imagined it. Still, the image of it was in my mind. A humanoid form which was creeping toward me on all fours, its legs bent and twisted, elongated and warped. Its eyes were yellow, the same color as the walls of this place, but its skin was covered in a fine black coating of fur. Or shag carpeting, maybe. It had moved with an oily quickness, almost as if it weren't a solid form but a liquid. Its teeth had looked solid, though, and sharp. I had maintained eye contact with it for just long enough to see it start to smile, a wide, creeping grin moving outwards and spreading from the corners of its lips. Picturing it again, I began to run. The mildew smell was so bad now it was suffocating, and instead of getting used to it, I found it was only affecting me more. It reminded me of when my dog had gotten skunked and had run all over the house and gotten on all the furniture before we could get the skunk oil off her fur. That smell from a distance was only mildly unpleasant, but once you sat in it for a few days, it became unbearable. I would have done anything to get rid of it. A chemical, acrid, horrible smell which invaded my senses and made me feel more sick every day I was around it. It was like a poison which my body was rejecting, causing headaches and nausea. This was like that, but 1,000 times worse. The mildew felt like it was growing inside of me now, and I could just imagine spores of it turning into mushrooms in my lungs as I ran. As I had that thought, I looked down and saw what I had just imagined. Actual mushrooms were growing in the corner of this room as I ran through it. That made me slow down to a walk again, as I realized I was in a room now, not a hallway. This one was larger than the others, but the lighting and moisture and the smell were just as bad. I stumbled forward and found the shag carpeting was dragging at my feet even more here, pulling me down into it with a force that was hard to resist. But I pressed onward, terrified of what would happen if I stopped. There were remnants of a kitchen in the next room, a fridge and a pair of cabinets with a sink, It reminded me of a break room in an office. I wandered over to the fridge, opening it to find a couple of shelves sparsely populated with moldy food. There was a sandwich blooming with blue and white fungus, and a sunken brown apple sitting next to it. Covering my nose with my sleeve, I closed the fridge door and tried to hold my breath until the stink was gone. When I finally did breathe again, it was no better than before. Curious, I went over to the sink and turned on the water, wondering what would happen if I did. It spit out some brown, muddy-looking liquid for a few seconds and then stopped, dripping afterwards for a while. I didn't feel hungry or thirsty, I realized, and I wasn't tired. A noise broke me from my thoughts, and I looked up to see something horrifying moving towards me. The creature I had seen following me was on the ceiling, racing into the room in a way I had not expected. It was like a giant black four-legged spider as it approached quickly and then dropped down on me, pinning me to the disgusting warm, wet floor. The shag carpeting gave way beneath me and I felt like it was alive, sucking me in, eating me. Carnivorous carpet, I thought, and a manic burst of laughter spilled out of me even as I was being attacked. Snarling, with teeth gnashing, the creature tried to snap and bite at my face as I pushed it away, trying to get it off of me. Its drool was dripping onto me as it snapped its teeth, raking its claws across my forearms and my face as I fought it. The thing was quick and angry, but I had the size advantage. I managed to roll and shove it off of me, kicking it hard in the face afterwards. Surprisingly, the creature whimpered and ran off like a wounded animal, but I had a feeling it would be back. Maybe with its friends. I tried to rise to my feet, but the moist shag carpeting was refusing to let me at first. It was grabbing and pulling at my clothing and at my exposed skin, like leather on a hot day. Finally, I managed to get away from it and rose to my feet with an effort. Looking around, I tried to remember which doorway I'd used to enter the room, but suddenly I couldn't remember. Then again, it didn't seem to matter anymore. There was no way out of this place. I was trapped here for eternity. This was purgatory. I guess I wasn't good enough for heaven and I wasn't quite fit for hell. "Hello?" I heard a voice say from behind me. I spun around, seeing a woman standing in the doorway. Terrified of what horrors this place had in store for me next, I stumbled backwards, until I crashed into the fridge. It didn't rock back and forth like a regular refrigerator, instead staying firmly planted like a boulder. The woman wasn't attacking me. She wasn't racing towards me on all fours with sharp teeth and claws. She wasn't trying to eat my face. Those were all potentially good signs. "Who are you?" I asked nervously. The woman looked almost as scared of me as I did of her, but then her face softened and she actually smiled at me. "You're real, aren't you?" she asked with a nervous titter. Last I checked, I felt myself returning her smile. "I saw you fight off that creature. Doesn't make sense for this place to attack one of its own, but then again..." The woman trailed off. "Then again?" "Then again, sometimes it surprises me. Sometimes this place really catches you off guard." "How long have you been here?" I asked as she approached me hesitantly from the other side of the room. "Not sure," she said, opening the fridge. "Time's sort of funny here." "There's nothing in there," I began to say, when she cut me off. "I know, I was trying to get the door off when I heard you coming." She began to pull and twist at the door of the fridge, yanking on it and trying to pop it from its seams. Why?" "Use your imagination. You never wanted to try breaking through one of those walls? Maybe this could do it." I tried to help her, using all my force to pull the refrigerator door from its hinges, but it wouldn't budge. "It's no use. Anything you can take with you is useless around here. This place doesn't let you get any advantage on it." "Yeah," I said, thinking of the pencil with no lead, the moldy sandwich, and the locked filing cabinet. "Hey, how did you wind up in this place?" The woman explained how she'd gotten on the elevator at 999 Nightshade, hitting 2 buttons by mistake. "Me too," I said. "Which ones did you press?" She thought about this for a moment. "I don't remember. It was so long ago." An idea seemed to strike her just then. "Hey, give me a boost. I want to try something." I cupped my hands and she began to climb up on top of the fridge. Then she pulled something out from her pockets. It was a set of car keys. She drove one of the keys into the ceiling, and it began to drip and bleed like an open wound. Red liquid smeared her hands and ran down her arms, splattering on the floor. But I could see moonlight and stars above. "See?" she said. "This is why I buy my pants from the men's section. Pockets. And the ladies in the office always made fun of me." I climbed up on the counter next to the fridge as she opened the hole in the ceiling wider with her car keys, sawing at what looked like flesh as the yellow ceiling opened up, creating a gaping hole, exposing the night sky. "Come on," she said, helping me up. The two of us crawled out through the gap in the ceiling, and I felt the beautiful, cool night air on my face and breathed it in, gasping. It was so much better than what was in there, in that horrible place. I looked down to see the gap in the ceiling remained, and if I wanted to, I could go back down there. But who in their right mind would ever want to do that? When I glanced back up, I saw the woman was gone, as if she had never existed in the first place. My car keys were in my hand as if I had been the one to cut through the ceiling. When I thought back, I even remembered doing it. Had the woman been a hallucination? A ghost? Someone who had jumped from this building in years past after being stuck inside that place? Or just another creature conjured up by that twisted place which existed between dimensions? The back rooms between worlds? One thing was for sure, I would never go back there. Never in a million years. I looked up and saw I was standing at the edge of the building's roof, looking down. But I didn't remember walking there. Backing away, my heart pounding in my chest, I looked around. The roof had no door leading back inside. There was no way to get off the roof. No way except going back through that hole I had come through. Either that or... I looked back down through the gap in the roof at the flickering yellow rooms, and then at the ledge. I looked down at the traffic far below. The cars so small. Without thinking, one of my feet was hovering over the open air, and I felt myself tipping forwards. No. Shaking my head hard, I broke myself from the trance. I stumbled backwards and fell hard onto my ass, but at least I wasn't falling forwards down into the cars below. I realized this place still had a hold on me, but it wouldn't for long. I could still escape, and I would. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I would have a lot of explaining to do when the rescuers got up here. They probably wouldn't believe my story if I told them how I made it up to this roof. But I know for sure, going back down, I'll take the stairs. Today's video was supported by patrons like Mark from Earth, Crimson Muse, Joy Burton, Diane Showers, Mark Zawal, Cheryl James, Pick Your Sticker, Teddy Dog, Clue 404, Mamakato, Dante Kincaid, Zarin Ray, Angela Donovan, Blairy Ann 50, Devin Kyle, Timothy Baird, Ajeti, Bert Turner, Bajani Espinal, Michael Pierce, Big Joe, Carrie Harkonnen, LaDonna Spivey, Scott Tanaka, Tom Stewart. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus video and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in the next Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.